Welcome back to FlexPath DXP. Terry, there's been a lot of noise lately around data breaches, including the recent 700 credit situation. Why should the auto industry see this as more than just another breach headline?
Yeah, Jay, and there's been a lot of issues lately. We put out an original public service announcement back in July about bad actors infiltrating legacy pre-qual web apps, and nobody really understands what that is. And the people that are using the legacy web apps, they don't understand it. But I think this latest 700 credit data breach, which, you know, it happens, and we've seen this happen across all industries. But unfortunately, it had to hit home in our industry for everybody to start, okay, maybe we should start paying attention to fraud in general. Now, this whole year, starting in AFSA and NADA, the themes were AI, fraud, and consumer affordability. So fraud is a big deal, but only certain people have been talking about it, and it's those people that have been affected by it. Now that the whole industry has been affected by this, I think it was 18,000 dealerships, millions of consumer records. Okay, that happens. It happened to Equifax last year, I think it was. So, but I think what it's doing is bringing the fraud awareness now to our industry as a whole.
You said this breach should be a wake up call for dealers and lenders. What exactly should the industry be waking up to right now?
Yeah, so what we're seeing as a fintech financial technology innovator and a fraud prevention strategist myself, we're seeing that fraud is being hit on all levels. AI is definitely pushing that harder and faster into the market. You've got AI fraud that's out there, automated bots, all of that. But lenders and dealers together. And what we learned at these different events is it's not just a dealer problem, it's not just a lender problem or a vendor problem. It's all of us together because it affects all of us at different levels in the buying process. So, the wake up call, it happened. Okay, 700 credit, I think, is doing the best they can to kind of keep everybody in the loop of what's going on, what happened. That's great. We all appreciate that they're forthcoming in providing information. But at the same time, I think you don't look at it and say, okay, it happened, we fixed it. It's going to continue to happen. But so now what are we doing as lenders, dealers, and vendors working together to make sure that whatever fraud is out there hitting our industry, that we're on top of it?
As you say, we're seeing breaches across healthcare, retail, finance, not just automotive. So, given that reality, is it fair to say most consumer data is already out there?
I think you have to, at this point, just figure your data's out there. It's out there. So now that it's out there, and whether it is or not, as long as you take proactive measures that to protect the data that's out there, because it's out there, and if it's not, it's going to be. So there's that. We have to look at it as, okay, it's out there now. How do we make sure that it's not being used in a fraudulent way?
So, if that's the case, where does the real risk actually come from?
So right now, what we're seeing, and we've talked about this in our original public service announcement back in July, where firsthand experience, I saw the CRM data. This is not something that we think this is going to happen. It might happen. It happened, and it's going to continue to happen as long as these bad actors can infiltrate these legacy web apps that collect name, address, phone number. Basic five-liner information is what the industry likes to call to perform a pre-qual, a soft pull, right? Five-liner soft pull. The problem with those, and again, we saw this in real time with real dealers, with real pre-qual web apps that collect name and address, phone number, email possibly. What we saw was they were hitting these pre-qual systems, real IDs, real names, addresses, but they weren't the real people submitting them. They were fraudsters trying to determine the credit eligibility of the names and addresses they have using these legacy pre-qual systems. So what happens is the data that's out there, they get these names and addresses. There's no credit data. So 700Credit said that the breach did not release any credit data. That's a good thing. That was good. So now these names and addresses are out there, but you have to validate, the bad actors have to validate whether they're creditworthy or not. Just because the dealer collected a name and address and did a soft pull, the bad actors don't know if those people were actually creditworthy. So what they're doing is they're using these legacy web apps to submit that information. Either the web app is returning the pre-qual information to the consumer in real time, or the soft pull is being done and the dealer's relaying that information to the consumer. Either way, two things are happening. One, a soft pull credit bureau is being done, and that's being done without real consumer consent, meaning the fraudster is actually submitting that information and that soft pull is being done. So it's not the real customer doing it. It's not the real person doing it. It's some fraudster doing it. A soft pull is being generated. May not affect the consumer's credit, but now the dealer is paying for that soft pull. Okay, so they're getting billed for a soft pull that was fraudulently submitted. Then that information goes back to the consumer, whether it's an email, however the dealer relays that information back to the consumer. It could be instantaneous. There are some web apps that I'm intimately familiar with because we've created those in the past. So I know the issues with these web apps because we've created these in the past, but now they're obsolete. We don't use those anymore because we've got to make sure that we're checking that, verifying that consumer credit up front before we actually do the soft pull. So that's one of the reasons we created VeriQual, was to do the identity verification before you do the soft pull. Okay, dealers will be like, yeah, we're using driver's license scan and all these other identity verifications. Okay, but that's further down the path, right? You've already done the soft pull. You're collecting driver's license, which, look, how many people want to give their driver's license? I don't even know where my driver's license is, right? So it's I got it. It's not handy all the time. So, and then I don't want to give the last thing I want to do is give my driver's license to somebody that I don't even know, right? Because where does that data go? So phone number is what we use. We use an OTP. Everybody's used to doing OTPs. Is it 100% fail safe? No, nothing is. Anybody that tells you that our solution does everything, will protect you from fraud, anybody that says that, I would second guess buying anything from them, because what that tells you is if they're saying that, they have no idea the fraud that's out there. And the fraud you're protecting today is different than the fraud you're going to need to protect tomorrow. So one solution doesn't do it. We're focused at the very top of the funnel to make sure those soft pulls are not charged ahead of time. But some vendors will be hesitant because they'll be like, wow, if you're limiting the soft pulls up front, that's gonna affect our revenue. So you have to think about, and I'm not calling anybody out on this, but you have to think about, if you're against upfront identity verification before you do the soft pull, the answer is why. Why would you be? There is nothing more important that you could be doing as a vendor or a reseller, credit bureau reseller, or a credit bureau for that matter, letting resellers sell credit bureaus into web apps that create fraud. And what's going to happen is, as this continues to get out there, and we've already done another public service announcement talking about, not necessarily, we mentioned the 700Credit breach, but again, that's not the issue here. The issue is not the breach. The breach is taken care of. 700Credit did what they could do to fix it. Okay, great. But the data that's out there is what we have to protect. And right now, our industry as a whole is not doing that as we speak right now.
You've been very vocal about legacy credit pre-qualification web. How do those tools unintentionally turn breach data into a fraud problem for dealers and lenders?
Yeah. So the data that's out there is being submitted into these legacy pre-qual web apps, name, address, phone number. A soft credit pull is being done. Sometimes it's a credit app because that social security number and date of birth can also be part of that consumer information that was captured during the breach, which we call PII, personal identifiable information. That can all be entered into a full credit app. So just because you're collecting a full credit app on your website doesn't mean you're verifying that customer. Because what's going to happen is you collect that information, whether it's a soft pull 5-liner, whether it's a full credit app, and you're pulling a bureau or you're submitting that deal to the lender for credit approval. Now you've got a hard pull being done on a potentially fraudulent deal. So now you are affecting the consumer's credit by doing a hard pull, not knowing if that's really the customer or not. Because if the goal of that fraudster is to get that, buy a vehicle from you, they're going to do soft pull, full credit app, whatever it is they need to do to get you to sell them a car, finance that car, right? So as that goes through your system unidentified, okay, now you start doing the driver's license, and not everybody's even doing that. And I'm not against driver's license scanning and the rest of the fraud prevention. We call that a fraud stack, right? The different components that you use as you go through the buying process. Highly recommend you use as much as you can. But remember, the further you go down in the stack, the more expensive it is, right? Driver's license scans, all of that. Those cost more money than if you're able to protect at the very top, filter out at the top, move through the process, and do your normal fraud prevention process. But you got to do that because now it's getting into the lenders. That loan goes on the book. It's a fraudulent loan. 2 months, 3 months later, it's found out that it's a fraud, and then the dealer gets charged back.
Can you walk us through at a high level how bad actors exploit these legacy pre-qual flows once they have basic consumer data?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, they're entering that data into the pre-qual web app or a full credit application without identity verification. So anybody could do it. I could enter your name and address. I know your name and address. I know your phone number. I know your email. So I could put your information into those pre-qualification web apps. I'm going to get a response back, and I'm going to find out whether Jay is pre-qualified to buy something. Once I know that, then I can know that Jay is a qualified buyer. I can go out and buy other things, not just a car.
So if breaches are unavoidable, what responsibility do I hate to laugh? You got me there. That was a good one.
Hits home now.
Yeah, it does. Well, if breaches are unavoidable, what responsibility does the auto industry have to prevent that data from being exploited once a consumer hits a dealer?
Right. So right now, the only system that's out there that does a identity verification and credit pre-qualification is VeriQual with just a phone number, starting with just a phone number. Now, there are other ways to do it. Unfortunately, right now in the marketplace, all we see are these 5-liners. And it was funny. We put out that public service announcement, and I got some phone calls from people that talked to other people that they were like laughed it off. And these were people that actually have these 5-liner pre-qual web apps. And they called me talking about the public service announcement that I put out there, that we put out there as FlexPath, and they just laughed about it. Like, oh, it's funny. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, if somebody is laughing at the public service announcement that we put out there about the product they're actually using to facilitate the fraud and what we call fraud incubators. That's what these pre-qual web apps are. They're fraud incubators. They're enabling the fraudsters to create these IDs, synthetic IDs, and bust outs, and all of the other fraud that goes with it. But it's expediting it because now, if the fraudster knows that that customer is credit eligible, they're ready to go. They're ready to go buy now, right? So, the companies and vendors, and I've sent these out to vendors, and I'm not going to name any names, but when they come back and either ignore it or laugh about it, I mean, that almost like I'm a lender, I'm a dealer, and I'm a fintech innovator. That bothers me, right? I mean, I'm like, really? Are you serious? That is it really funny that your product is facilitating these fraud incubators? Seriously. So what's going to happen? These vendors, and they're vendors, they're not the dealers. A lot of times the dealers don't know what to do. So it really is up to the vendors. It's up to the lenders, and maybe the credit bureaus need to say something, because here's what's going to happen. The PSA was sent to FTC, CFPB, our state legislators who I'm connected with, the FBI Citizens Academy alumni. I'm a member of InfraGard, which is FBI InfraGard. And actually, I recommend anybody out there that's in our industry that has anything to do with credit, join INFRA GARD. It's an FBI program. You join as a member or an individual, not as a company, but that will key you into, and they have local and national events, and it's free to join. But you can find out about fraud. You can submit fraud cases. So we're working with people outside the industry, and God forbid that these class action firms get a hold of this, because not only is this affecting the consumer, and it is, because if you're letting fraudsters validate consumer credit, you as a vendor, now that you know that this is a problem, you're going to be named in the class action lawsuit. You knew about it, you did nothing about it, so now you're on the hook. The dealers that know about this are also going to be called into class action. The resellers, the credit resellers, and again, we all know who they are. They know about this. They're going to be called into it. This class action, and you're talking 18,000 dealers. Now, the dealers that don't know, or even if they do know, if they don't know what to do, they need to do something immediately, because right now, if they change their pre-qual to something that validates the customer up front, then they become the protector, and they would not be liable. I'm not an attorney. If you're doing something to protect the consumer, in this case, you're on the better side of not doing anything at all.
What's the single biggest change dealers and lenders should be thinking about right now when it comes to credit pre-qualification?
The single thing is identity verification before you do the soft pull or the hard pull, both. That's it. That's the bottom line. Now, how you do that, that's up to you. There are not many companies that are doing that. We are one, and okay, it's a self-promotion plug, but I'm a lender, I'm a dealer, and I create stuff that for me first, and then we're able to roll that out to other dealers and lenders. So am I a vendor? Yes, but I also know how to fix problems that we're up against, which is why when I talk to somebody about this, a lot of times they're like, oh, you're just trying to sell a product, or you're just trying to do, okay, whatever, but I'm here to solve a problem. Now, if you don't want to work with me, that's okay, but you better go and solve the problem on your own right now, because right now the fraud is happening. Every second you wait is you're allowing this to happen. So you either turn off your product that's creating these web apps, or you get somebody to help you fix it now. You can build something later, whatever, fine, build it. But if you know about it and then you build it while you allow it to continue to happen, that's a problem.
You often talk about a fraud stack. How does fixing pre-qualification fit into that bigger picture?
Yeah. So, and that's important because, when we looked at this and nobody even knew what a fraud stack was. Tech stack, we've heard of tech stacks. Similar, but you're lining up all the fraud protection pieces to protect you against the fraud. And I've done numerous seminars and webinars and real-time presentations at different industry events and talking about the Swiss cheese approach of fraud prevention, right? Because if you have one slice, you have holes, right? So things can get through. The more slices of that Swiss cheese you have, the less of a chance you have of something to get through. That's the fraud stack. So again, the further you start up at the top of the fraud stack, the less expensive it is. Cloudflare, one of the things they do is they validate IP addresses, right? Because an IP address comes through and you can decode the IP address and it may be like, okay, well, that's local. Okay, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because fraudsters can take the IP addresses. And so Cloudflare, what they do is they validate the IP addresses up front because just because it resolves to an IP address locally, maybe it's spoofed. And that's what Cloudflare can do. It's really from China or some other country. That's the IP address is coming from. Cloudflare does that. I think they're one of the best in the industry. But you got to have that, right? That's at the very top. It's very inexpensive, but it's going to block out all of the spoofs on your IP addresses. That's number one, right? Number one, part of the top of the stack. We come in, Veriqual, and we come in and start doing the identity verification with just a phone number. Frictionless, easy, fast. There's other parts of the fraud stack that also do identity verification. They're further down the funnel, usually more expensive. You still have to do it, but get as few of those through so you're not paying for as many of the license scan or whatever the other pieces of that you go through when you're doing your fraud prevention. So start at the top, least expensive, cut out as much as you can of the fraud, and then as it goes through the funnel, your other pieces take care of the rest.
If someone watching this is a dealer, lender, or vendor, and they're not sure where they stand, what's the first step they should take after watching this video?
So one of the things we've done is put together a contact us, right? I'm happy to talk to any dealer, vendor, lender, whoever it is, and we're getting calls and emails now. I mean, I'm literally getting phone calls for people asking about the public service announcement that we put out. We've also put out an email that you can email direct to us. It's called pre-qual review at FlexPathDXP.com. Send us an email. Get us in touch with the person that you would like us to talk to review your credit pre-qual and credit application flow, and we'd be happy to look at it. I've talked to numerous dealers, and some of them are like, they're doing just a driver's license scan. They're not doing any pre-qual. Okay, that's okay. I'm not here to sell. I'm here to help. If our product works, if you think it helps, great. I'd be happy to work and sell you a product. It's very inexpensive compared to the fraud we're stopping. So we think it's worth it. Again, I'm a dealer. I'm a lender. We use this ourselves. So we create things for ourselves that we know are useful in the industry and the marketplace.
Pre-qual review at FlexPathDXP.com. Send an email. Stop the fraud. Terry, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay.